soothsayer said, beware the Ides of March. Today is the Ides of March, so I ask you to beware. Unfortunately, the soothsayer's words came to pass, and Julius Caesar was assassinated, as you know. But sometimes it's interesting to go back in history and compare where you are and where what used to be. Demosthenes was quite an Athenian, and he, when his father died, was put in charge of 3 guardians. 3 people look after this money and his property. And like today, people take advantage of the children and all like that. They took his money, sold the property, and so when the boy got old enough, he prosecuted them, and he was good at it. Got his property back, became a public figure, and as we say, the rest is history in Athens, because he became one of the greatest orators. But he didn't get there by accident. He couldn't talk very well when he started, but by exercise, he would walk and he would recite poetry. He would speak above the roaring of the waters to get his voice to be projected. He did well. And then he would put pebbles, you heard that part of the story, put pebbles in his mouth so that his pronunciation and his words could come out with good diction. Oh, how I long for the day when this honorable house will improve the quality of the debate. You can leave the rabble-rousing outside. But we are gentlemen. We are gentlemen. Let's respect one another. I read the word. I read the word. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God. And the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God. And those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. And now this verse, which is, I think you should go back and read it. Romans 13, verse 4. For he, the ruler, the MP, the magistrate, the prime minister or deputy, for he is God's minister to you for good. That's quite a compliment. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. And the conclusion of the matter is from my favorite paraphrase, Dr. Phillips, who says, every Christian ought to obey the civil authorities, for all legitimate authorities derive from God Almighty, and the existing authority is appointed under God. To oppose authority, then, is to oppose God, and such opposition is bound to be punished. The honest citizen has no need to fear the keepers of the law and order, but the dishonest man will always be nervous of them. If you want to avoid this anxiety, just lead a law-abiding life, and all that can come your way is a word of approval. The officer is God's servant for your protection, but if you are leading a wicked life, you have reason to be alarmed. The power of the law, which is vested in every legitimate officer, is no empty phrase. He is, in fact, divinely appointed to inflict God's punishment upon evildoers. I have a philosophy which I will, if I get a chance, if the House is not dissolved before the time, which I will say. But let me just say, I think that we are too soft on criminals. People who exhaust all their appeals ought to feel the weight of the law. I just read it to you. Don't give up your right as MPs for this country to lead us aright because of Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary, Fanny, or Sue. Let's do the right thing, and God will back us up. For God is not asleep. He slumbers not, nor sleeps. Thank you for listening to my little soliloquy this morning. Let us pray. Oh God, our Heavenly Father, how thankful we are that our lives are spared to see another morning, this wonderful morning in March. We thank you that in you we must live and move and have our very being, for you are the God who provides. Thank you for blessing our country and trying to help those in charge to fix those things that are out of order and the things that are wrong. Thank you that we can be a part of God's plan to build a better nation. Bless your servants, these ladies and gentlemen who have been appointed here to do this business. And be especially with the leaders who are in place at this time, that they will be conscious that you are the sovereign God and all power lies with you. Bless those who are aspiring, and they will not take this lightly. They will recognize the great responsibility that comes with these positions. Now bless our people, those who are suffering, those who are mourning, those who are looking for jobs still, those who are learning. Bless the whole Commonwealth today, we humbly pray. In the name of our Lord Jesus, who taught us when we pray to say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Good morning, honorable members. Today is Wednesday, the 15th of March, in the year of our Lord 2017. I'd like to welcome you back to the continuation of a sitting of this honorable House. Last sitting we suspended at second reading and committal, and the next item on the agenda was Committee of the Whole. But before we resume, I'll recognize the House Leader acting in a moment. Before we resume the agenda, just by way of announcement, certainly delighted to have as our guest this morning the Bahamas Hotel and Allied Workers Union. Good to see you and welcome to this honorable House. And also by way of announcement, regarding Garden Hills, there will be a special branch meeting held tomorrow evening at 7:30 at S.C. McPherson Junior High. I'd certainly like to invite all the residents of the constituency of Garden Hills to join us and hear of your Member of Parliament's record of stewardship and vision for the future of Garden Hills. For those who would like further information, kindly contact 325-2000 for more information. That's tomorrow night, 7:30, S.C. McPherson, special branch meeting. Thirdly, by way of Rule 43, communication by ministers, wanted to acknowledge and allow the member for Carmichael to give a brief intervention with respect to the youth and activities going on in our country today. So the member is so prepared, the chair will recognize him at this time. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for allowing me this brief intervention. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, we have a scenario that has evolved in the country as of yesterday as to do with our High School National Champs Series being held this week at the National Sports Stadium and Arenas. Firstly, I want to say to the Family Island parents, delegates, MPs, coaches, and students that I wish to apologize and acknowledge any frustrations they would have had yesterday as a result of a massive oversubscription to these games and this event. We had two things happen yesterday, Mr. Speaker, that I really had no control over. Is our logistics, which had everything planned. One, people would know we had a tornado in the morning. I changed our flight arrangements, obviously, at the airports. We are moving several hundred young people from the Family of Islands into Nassau for this event, and so our morning schedule, of course, had to change. And then in the afternoon, when we did have, I'm not wanting to turn my phone on, if I could just put it on silent, because I'm getting a lot of calls. In the afternoon, we had this massive storm in the northeast, where we had, again, delays and scheduling difficulties. I really want to congratulate people who worked all night. I've been up all night. This is what I look like in the morning after being up all night. Later in the day, it gets even worse. But we were up all last night, accommodating particularly the Family Island students. We got hundreds of calls from the parents in the Family of Islands. Some called myself, the Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, of course, the MPs. MPs called from the Family Islands, Zuma, Ragged Island, Eleuthera, I mean, from everywhere, really concerned about how the kids were doing. And I wish to report today that everyone is accounted for. Everyone is absolutely fine. We, had pizza, played basketball. 90% of the children that came in were accommodated in hotel accommodation. Some very high-class accommodation, some not so great accommodation, but we got most of them in. We had a small group that in the evening, some of the boys, I asked them if they would mind. They said they could camp out at the gym, and so they stayed at the gym. They had a good time. I checked on them this morning. They're already up at 5 a.m. at the track, training, and I'm going to bring this back to our colleagues here at the Hotel Association later. They were at the track this morning, 5 a.m. training, already back at 6 a.m., had their breakfast, and showered by 7. Whereas the ones in the hotels, they ain't reached yet. So that's an opportune problem, is an opportunity in disguise, is that we really should have these accommodations within the sporting complex. But Mr. Speaker, everyone is fine and accounted for. We had security dispatched to every facility where children were housed. Some were at Sun Fun, some were at Colony, some at the Marriott Courtyard, and so we had Royal Bahamas Defense Force and Royal Bahamas Police Force at each location, making sure that the young people, this is a national event, you're not allowed to go out at night, you're not allowed to do certain things, no drinking, no carousing. I took charge of that last night at midnight, and we placed those people, and there was no problems whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, the real effort behind this, I want to report, is that in the past, we've had national championships in track and field, one for private schools and one for public schools. And I don't want to be involved in that. We've also had championships where the Nassau kids get to come and the Family Island kids don't get to come. And I don't want to be a part of that. And so I determined 3 years ago that we would endeavor to host a real national championship series where every top 20 athlete in the Bahamas, in each island, in each community, each constituency, each area, each school, could come to championships and perform. Years ago we had the Bahama Games that were canceled because it wasn't fair, because the things were not equitably distributed across the Bahamas for the children to perform. We are correcting that. We're doing sports facilities in each major island. I got 5 great lawns coming at the end of the summer for each island. 5 international coaches for each island, new sports academy, and of course in September we opened the sports academy at University College Bahamas for the same reason, to level the playing field. We know the talent that exists in these islands. We're making every effort to bring them in. So the problem evolved yesterday. We had invited actually 300 of the top athletes from the Family Islands. 400 then applied, and 700 turned up. 700 turn up. Now, it was a trouble to me last night, but I'm telling you all that's a good problem to have. Because those 700 young people from the Family Islands, they say they want a chance to run against this set in Nassau on this track they see Usain Bolt on. They only see it on TV, they won't be here, and they want to run. So I overextend myself to them, not to you all, I ain't worrying about you all, to them, and I can give them a chance today to run. I put my credit card up last night, you know, and it catch on fire. Right? I overextended myself to these children. I can give them a chance to run, but it ain't easy. We have 700 kids in from the Family Islands, about, 100, 150 coaches and chaperones, and 800 applicants from Nassau. So this event is going to go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. For the first time ever, we can have a test event for World Relays, all the exposure we can give these kids. So I'm asking the parents and people there who understand what we're trying to do to bear with me. We're trying to give everyone a chance. And out of this, you will see a couple things evolve. For the first time, we will have 40 scholarships available for girls and 40 scholarships available for boys. We're making sure that at the end of this, the winners in the boys and females 4x1 and 4x4 get a fully paid trip to the Penn Relays coming up in a few weeks, so they'll get the exposure. And I guarantee you, most of those kids are going to be from where? The Family of Islands who hadn't had a chance yet. You all look out for the boys from North Andros. Of course, you know, Moores Island is in town. The fellas from Cat Island are in town. The fellas from Michael in town. And people have never seen them run before. And they come here with something to prove. Some of them big as house. I know where they've been farming them, but they come here with something to prove. So I want the parents to know I take responsibility for these kids. I get the police watching them. Everyone is fine. We're doing what we said we would do. The top 20 athletes from all the major Family of Islands who have never had a chance to be at this track, in this facility, here with us. I brought all of them to Nassau. They will be in our care for several days. I'd like for people to come out and support them. I want fellas like Renwood passed by the gym, passed by the track. Give them your support, show your encouragement. We're giving them the opportunity. And at the end of this, they're doing it for a reason. Of course, Bamboo Town also. And we're so the member for Bamboo Town.
I shall be present.
Sorry. Former national record holder, you know, and he has a son and a daughter who are in the nationals. But he ain't raced me yet. They can come to that later. But we want people to come out and actually support them and do what you can to help. We do have our challenges because we have more than 3 times as many people here. More than 3 times as many people here. Now I come to my closer for the Minister of Tourism, who helped me out mightily last night, is that we have a space within the National Stadium grounds. There's a 450-acre sports park. We have these events coming, rapid fire. Line us up for the next 3 years. We have events every couple months, this size. Some domestic, some international. We have a school of hotel training and hospitality right across the street from the lot that I have demarcated for a sports hotel. It would be a great thing if after your leave here today, if your president, give me a buzz, send me a note. I'd like to show you all something. We could do a joint venture, build a 200-room sports hotel on that complex that is a joint venture between the Government of the Bahamas, Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, the hotel union with all that masses of money that you all have, and the kids at the University College Bahamas Hotel Training College, where they would run it, you all supervise it, and we'll back it. We'll back it, seriously. We're at that point right now, and we're in the business of sports, so we're supposed to own everything from the ground up. The reason I get into problems last night, we're dating our hotels. We don't own no hotel. I don't know how you're in a big industry and you don't own nothing. So I'm saying to you all, instead of worrying about what these people paying you, let's get our own things and pay yourself. When Mr. Speaker, that's my report on high school nationals. They're going very well. We have 700 kids, and actually 699, but 700 kids who we have accommodated. Today, everyone will be placed in hotels. We had a couple of fellas in the gym last night. Everyone will be placed today. It's going well. The matches start today, goes right until Sunday. We ask people, please come out and support these kids. And at the end of it, we'll be awarding 40 scholarships for student athletes, male and female, some to College of the Bahamas, University of Bahamas, and some to North American colleges. This is the first time we're doing it of this magnitude, and for this reason, and some of these kids from the Family of Islands deserve the opportunity I have overextended myself to give them. So I take full responsibility for any confusion that might have happened, and I can continue to push to see if I can give them the chance that they'll get this week. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Member for Fort Charlotte?
Just in response to the Minister for Youth, Sports and Culture, I was advised this morning that the persons who came from the Family Islands were very upset by this. I think the Minister, I appreciate the fact that he brought the report this morning, but he has downplayed to some extent just how aggrieved the travelers from the Family Islands, the chaperones, the teachers, and students have been as a result of this. I'm happy to hear that at the end of it, he indicated that, in his words, some guys slept at the gym last night. My information is that there were quite a number of students who were forced to sleep at the gym last night, and the frustration emanates from the fact that this is an event that was postponed 3 times. So the fact is that there was advance notice. One would expect that with all the vast experience that the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture has in putting on these types of events, that they would have made adequate preparation for those coming from the Family Islands for a local event. So if you could at least acknowledge that there were a large number of students staying at the gymnasium last night, indicating a lack of preparation, I think that would at least satisfy those who today may not be appreciative of the way that this was downplayed by you, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Thank you, Honorable Members. Before we continue, just wanted, by way of correction, the group representing, visiting with us in the gallery is not just the Bahamas Hotel and Allied Workers Unions, but there are also various unions. So my apologies for acknowledging that. The entire group, and you are duly noted. Now to the business at hand. The chair will recognize the member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador to move the House agenda. You recognize, Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave first to move the withdrawal of the motion to resolve the committee of the whole House as we last left the House.
That's correct.
If I could just obtain a second.
Moved and seconded to
Yeah,
and it's a second part to it.
also, yes, and that we go back to first reading of bills on the agenda.
So moved and seconded that the House do withdraw its motion to Committee of the Whole and revert to first reading on the agenda. As many as in favor remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is passed. The House will revert to first reading on the agenda. First reading. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates. First reading.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Employment Act.
Thank you, honorable member. We order that the bill be brought up.
Next one.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Employment Act. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Employment Act.
For the first reading of bills, Chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Industrial Relations Act.
Order that the bill be brought up. Just wait a moment. Pause a moment. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Industrial Relations Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Industrial Relations Act.
Member for Golden Gates,
Mr. Speaker,
you're recognized.
yeah, just in laying these two amendments, Mr. Speaker, we just sought to strengthen the position of the Industrial Relations Act. We have met with all of the social partners over the period of the past year or so, where we realized that we had several significant weaknesses in the Act, both in the Industrial Relations Act and the Employment Act. We have seen over the years where employees were made redundant at a moment's notice. We have seen over the years where employees were not paid their redundancy pay. We have seen where many employees continue to be taken advantage of. One of the things that we also we have seen over the years is even though the Industrial Tribunal is there to assist persons to settle their disputes in a way where they don't have to use a lawyer, which would in most cases cost them thousands of dollars. We have seen the process was very prolonged, and sometimes in cases of disputes, they are left not settled for in excess of 3 or 4 years. And so in laying these amendments, we are seeking to put the unions, employees in the Bahamas in a position where employers will take less advantage of them. And like everything else, we can't legislate everything, but we wanted to the greatest extent possible, see how we could bring a level of assistance to the employees and the workers and the unions of the country, where they're able to have their disputes settled. Since in most cases we see where employers are unwilling to sit down and settle these disputes. We saw at Malia, for instance, where the employers unilaterally decided to stop deducting union dues. So that's one of the things we had to address. Where immediately upon the registration of the union and recognition, employers are obligated to deduct union dues. So we've strengthened in a number of ways, and we look forward to all of the workers of the country benefiting in a significant way as a result of these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further first reading of bills? Second reading and committal of bills? Second reading and committal of bills. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the second reading committal of the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2017. And in doing so, I recall that I was here speaking about 2 weeks ago, and indicated then that we would be moving what I called a companion piece of legislation to the Trafficking in Persons Act, which we did a couple of weeks ago. And that act, in talking about it, I tried to put into context the reason why we were bringing bringing that particular amendment. And so I would now like to bring the second part of that, the companion piece of legislation, to it. And I hope that that the bill is not seen to be contentious in any way. But it's important to provide, again, the context of this. The first thing I'd like to say is that is to just explain what the court system is to those who may be unfamiliar with it. There are essentially two sets of courts in this country. One is a court of unlimited jurisdiction, or a superior court, which most people would recognize in common parlance as the Supreme Court. And this court has an unlimited jurisdiction, which means it has jurisdiction throughout the world and on all matters. The second kind of court is an inferior tribunal, which is largely a statutory-based court, and most people in common parlance would know it as the magistrate's court. And they are the two courts that essentially deal with criminal matters in the Bahamas. So there's a magistrate's court, there's the Supreme Court. Magistrate's court in our law has a limitation in terms of the kinds of matters it can deal with and the penalties it can impose. The more serious matters in our law, in the criminal law, are dealt with by the Supreme Court. And this is usually matters which will draw penalties over 5 years in prison. A magistrate, as I understand the present rules, cannot impose penalties, generally speaking, which are longer than 5 years in prison. But there are reasons for putting cases in one set of courts or the next. Magistrates' courts are more efficient. They don't require the impaneling of juries. And they are, in a sense, closer to the people because it is a kind of summary justice. Magistrate hears the evidence, is the trier of the fact and also of the law, makes a decision, and then the penalty is imposed. And many of the cases, including serious cases like those of the violation of the gun laws and of drugs and even trafficking in persons, are tried before magistrates. But it is possible when there is a particularly egregious case in which the state may want to show a sterner penalty or show stronger judgment against those individuals if found guilty. There are reasons for putting cases before the Supreme Court that can draw these penalties of longer than 5 years. The other thing I should explain is that there are cases in the magistrate's court, or there are cases or charges that can be made that can be that are called triable either way. And these are cases where a defendant comes before a court and can elect, or is asked to choose, do you want this matter heard in the magistrate's court, or do you want to have this matter heard in the Supreme Court? And that's called a triable either way offense. So at the start, the magistrate, you appear before a magistrate. Most charges are brought before a magistrate, and you're given a choice in certain offenses. And these offenses are all laid out. All of this, for those of you who have a slow evening and want some illuminating reading, can go and find the Criminal Procedure Code and have a look at it, because it lays it all out there, how the charges are brought and what your rights are when you appear before the court, and so on and so forth. So that's the Criminal Procedure Code. Some people find it exciting reading, as I say, so you have fun, those who want to have a look at it. One of the more interesting provisions, of course, in our law is that it is possible for private citizens to bring a prosecution, which we know colloquially as a private prosecution, even though the Attorney General has the power to take over and stop any prosecution. But private citizens have on occasion successfully brought private prosecutions. So that basically outlines the structure of the courts and the triable either way offenses and the summary offenses. Now, there's another thing which has been added, which you might also hear, and that's called preliminary inquiry, a preliminary inquiry. And there's another procedure you may hear about called the voluntary bill of indictment. So I'd just like to explain what those are in brief. When you're charged with offenses which have to be brought before the Supreme Court, in the old law, what would happen is you would appear before a magistrate, and the magistrate would do what's called a preliminary inquiry. And that inquiry was designed to determine whether or not there's a prima facie case for the matter to be referred to the Supreme Court. So the magistrate would hear what the Crown's evidence is. Usually the defendant would not, beside cross-examining some of the Crown's witnesses, the defendant would not offer any evidence at that point. And at the end of the presentation of the Crown, the defendant would say to the magistrate, from what I see here, there's not a prima facie case for this matter to go to the Supreme Court, and the matter should be dismissed. The magistrate would reserve his or her judgment and then come back and decide whether there's a prima facie case. And it's a very low standard. Just need to have enough evidence. So the Crown just needs to show that it has enough evidence to make out a case when it goes to the Supreme Court. Now, of course, when it goes to the Supreme Court, there's a full trial. A jury is impaneled, and the jury then decides the facts. The judge, of course, tells the jury what the law is. Now, you would know that there were complaints throughout the country for a long time on how slow these procedures are. And things were really bogged down. So in order to deal with that, there was introduced into our law something called the Voluntary Bill of Indictment. And essentially, this Voluntary Bill of Indictment enables the Crown to collect all the evidence it has and present it before a magistrate, present it to the defendant or his lawyer, and say, we propose to use this evidence and go directly to the Supreme Court without a preliminary inquiry. So the question of going through the evidence over a long period of time and trying to find out a prima facie case is eliminated, and the Attorney General collects the evidence, provides it to the other side, and the matter automatically goes on to the Supreme Court, where the person is then arraigned and the trial is held. So that's a voluntary bill of indictment, and it's more particularly described as a paper procedure to move matters which are triable on information, which is another way of saying trials before the Supreme Court, trial on information to the Supreme Court for trial. Now, this procedure was used most relevantly to this particular matter this morning in a case called the Crown or the Queen against Chevenix Hall. And it was brought before the Supreme Court on a voluntary bill of indictment, and she was convicted of the offense of trafficking in persons, contrary to the Trafficking in Persons Prevention and Suppression Act, which is Chapter 106 of the statute laws of the Bahamas. And the Trafficking in Persons Act created offenses relating to trafficking in persons. And when I spoke the last time, I explained, or tried to explain, the difference between trafficking in persons and smuggling. And trafficking in persons has basically to do with the use of force or devices to put people in a position of servitude, involuntary servitude, by keeping them in conditions where they're unable to move about freely, by, for example, withholding their passports if they're foreign workers in a country, and not allowing them to move or to leave or to hold on to their work permits. And it very often is utilized against children. And this has been described as modern-day slavery, and the world is very much sensitized to this. And so the Trafficking in Persons Act was part of the regime which was put in place in the Bahamas to show that we were serious about these offenses. That, and this most particularly affects foreign persons who brought into a country could not be kept in involuntary servitude. And we made this a specific offense in law. It doesn't apply to foreign nationals only, but can also apply to Bahamian citizens. But the whole idea is to prevent involuntary servitude. And the international community, as I said, is sensitized to this. There is a UN rapporteur who is responsible for monitoring each country and how they perform according to the international standards and agreements on trafficking in persons. But we have a neighbor to the north called the United States of America that has a particular program of monitoring and applies sanctions to countries that don't comply with what they consider to be the standards in connection with suppressing and fighting trafficking in persons. This is one of the realities of the real politic of living in the world. The big players get to dictate terms. So even though we may and are serious in our own right about fighting this, there's another external axis that we have to be concerned about. And their regime in their law has created Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 2 watch, Tier 3. Tier 3 means that you are subject to sanctions if you don't, for not having complied with the strictures of trafficking in persons. Tier 2 watch means that you're in danger of doing so. Tier 2 means that you're not up to the highest standards and therefore you need to improve. And Tier 1 is you are at an acceptable standard as far as they're concerned. Bahamas obtained the Tier 1 status 2 years ago. It's done annually. The review period ends, I'm told, the 31st of March, so we're just up against that. And what the concern is that we do not want to fall in that system, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 2 watch, or Tier 3. We want to maintain the Tier 1 status. This case of Chevenix Hall was a successful prosecution. I believe it may have been, stand to be corrected on this, but may have been the first successful prosecution under the Act. And so therefore, it was a signature prosecution. And the fact that these charges were brought, we were able, in our discussions with the United States government, to convince them that the Bahamas, in part, due to the successful movement of this case, should be a Tier 1 status. So we don't want to jeopardize that. And of course, you know, there's a lot of security cooperation and support which the United States government gives, training to our military and police, and we would not want to be in danger of losing that support. Because I think if you get to Tier 3, it takes a waiver of the United States President in order to not have those sanctions. And that's something we would certainly not want to have to be negotiating or getting involved in. So this is trying to be proactive and on top of the situation. So the conviction takes place. The law was passed to ensure that we were compliant with international norms and efforts to combat activity in which people were exploited for material gain and preyed upon other persons seeking to improve their circumstances. Now, the offenses in the Trafficking in Persons Act are triable either summarily, that is, before a magistrate, or can be tried by information. So there are two types two types of trials you can have. You can either be tried summarily or on information. Now, when Chevenix Hall was sentenced in June of 2014, she was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. So this is a very serious offense. So serious that a judge sentenced her to 15 years in jail. She appealed the case to the Court of Appeal, and the conviction was subsequently quashed on the basis that the offenses could not be tried on information and that there was no lawful authority to prefer a VDI, or a voluntary bill of indictment. So what the Court of Appeal said is the Crown got it wrong because the matter could not be tried before the Supreme Court, and secondly, it didn't have the authority to refer the matter by way of voluntary bill of indictment to the Supreme Court. The Crown appealed this decision to the Court of Appeal, from the Court of Appeal to the Privy Council. And the Privy Council's decision was delivered on the 17th of October last year. And it concluded that the Court of Appeal was incorrect to find that the offense could not be tried on information. So that stands up. You can still take it before the Supreme Court. But the Privy Council concluded that due to the definition of indictable offense in Section 2 of the Code, the voluntary bill of indictment procedure could not be utilized, as that procedure could only be used in relation to offenses which are triable on information only. So, in other words, you couldn't bring something before a magistrate's court and then decide while you're before the magistrate, I want to move this to the Supreme Court, and you just move it to the Supreme Court. They said that the way Section 2 defined indictable offense meant that you could only do it where something was triable on information only. So not triable either way, not summary. So, or, again, those who are interested in reading the Criminal Procedure Code, or if you've listed the offense in the third schedule of the Criminal Procedure Code. So what the Privy Council said is that this matter, in those cases where you wanted to move it to the Supreme Court, you needed to utilize the preliminary inquiry procedure, which is what I explained earlier, where the magistrate would have to find there's a prima facie case, and those of you who remember the old days, I'm not sure they're the good old days, but the old days, where these preliminary inquiries got stretched out and stretched out and stretched out and stretched out, and it took a long time before the magistrate actually concluded and then sent them over to the Supreme Court. So Privy Council said, if you want to take this to the Supreme Court under the existing law, you have to use the preliminary inquiry procedure. So now you should note again that since the relevant offenses in the Trafficking in Persons Act can be tried either in the Magistrates Court or the Supreme Court, the decision of the Privy Council applies to this third type of case, that is, those that are triable either way. So if it's a triable either way offense, Privy Council says, sorry, you can't use these procedures. Now, even though the Trafficking in Persons Act is what this is in part we're hanging our hats on to correct this problem, there are other offenses in law which this procedure has been used for and heretofore was thought to be lawful. It should be noted that offenses under the Dangerous Drugs Act in Chapter 228 and under the Firearms Act, Chapter 213, are also impacted by this decision. And they are similarly drafted and not listed in the third schedule of the Criminal Procedure Code. Accordingly, under the present definition of indictable offense, the voluntary bill of indictment procedure cannot be used to move these types of offenses to the Supreme Court for trial. The result would be, as I said, that a preliminary inquiry would have to be used and would be necessary. And on those occasions when offenses under these acts are deemed serious enough to warrant a trial in the Supreme Court, and this would occasion delay and a significant regression in the use of judicial resources. Now, the Privy Council made a suggestion to the Crown or as to how the problem could be cured if they insisted that this was the most efficient and best way to deal with the matter. They said in the decision that the Attorney General can use the voluntary bill of information in all cases where it's a trial on information. So what you simply needed to do if you wanted to accomplish that, given the present definition, was take the word only out of the definition. So if you simply expunge the word only from the definition of indictable offenses in Section 2, you resolve this problem. So the Crown has taken that advice, and they are now proposing, Crown, we are proposing that the definition in Section 2, which now exists, should be repealed, and the new definition will read, indictable offense means any offense which is triable on information before the Supreme Court. So, any offense which is triable on information before the Supreme Court will now you'd be able to use this voluntary bill of indictment procedure under the Trafficking in Persons Act and not run afoul of what I've just described. Now, in addition, where an offense is triable either summarily or on information, that is, summarily meaning the magistrate's court, or on information meaning the Supreme Court, and the accused person has no right to elect the mode of trial, that is, it's not triable either way, it is proposed that the power to commence a prosecution in this instance be statutorily vested in the Attorney General or her delegate, without any reference to the magistrate for determination of the mode of trial. So, in this regard, Clause 3 of the bill now seeks to include a new subsection 8 of Section 58 of the Criminal Procedure Code Act, which provides, we'll now read as follows, where an offense is triable either summarily or on information, summarily meaning in the magistrate's court, or on information meaning in the Supreme Court, and an accused person has no right to elect the mode of trial. So it's not taking away any right that the person has. It's just saying if under the law there's no right to elect the mode of trial, the prosecution of such an offense can be commenced on behalf of the Crown either summarily or on information as permitted by the Code, without any reference to the magistrate for determination of the mode of trial. So for efficiency's sake, this amendment will ensure that the matter can go, if the Attorney General believes it's more efficient, that the case is serious enough that it can go directly before the Supreme Court. So that's what the bill in summary is seeking to do. I know it's not the most exciting material, but these things have to be done. It's what you call kind of tidying up exercise. I think, as from the Foreign Ministry's perspective, having accomplished this before the 31st of March would be something which we hope is in our arsenal to be utilized. Yes, I was trying to think that quiver is the word, eh? Yeah, an arrow in the quiver to speak to our partners to the northeast and say that we are seeking to be compliant with the international norms in taking this matter seriously, that these cases can be brought before the Supreme Court and dealt with accordingly with the appropriate penalties. With that, I think that outlines effectively the policy behind the act and explains what we are seeking to do, and I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do we have a second, though? Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Speaker, I trust that this amendment would not suffer much debate, as I think the case has been made out amply by the mover, having done an exhaustive analysis of the reasoning as to why, but it's very legalistic, yes, but it's necessary for the compliance of what I call our international moral obligations. Mr. Speaker, it is no coincidence. I mean, it is a coincidence that we have present in the gallery the leaders of unions in our country, President and the officers of the hotel union, my nemesis, the president of the BPL union, and my other nemesis, the president of the Water and Sewers union. And it's interesting because, you know, the amendment to the Criminal Procedure Code, the factors, as was pointed out by the member for Foxhill, that inform, first of all, this amendment stems from the amendment that was made to the Trafficking in Persons Act, and the fundamental reason for the development and evolution of this specific offense, which has been dubbed an offense against humanity, really finds its genesis in the manner in which employers treat employees. It really evolved from the fact that employers still believe that their businesses are plantations. That's the basis for it. And so when, for example, a court, in determining whether this offense has been committed, one of the things they could look at is, and usually it comes from the workplace, because we were very concerned, for example, when with the construction at Bahama, when they had the foreign workers there, you would find that their passports were held, their work permits were held, and that was a means to control. A means to control them. Huh?
Their employer.
The employer. Yeah, the employers. The employers. No, that's the employers. So yeah, so they were the employers, and employers have, quite apart from the fact that employees are concerned about keeping their jobs, and they very sometimes suffer under all sorts of conditions and suffer abuses, right? Particularly where you have what I call the foreign employer dealing with local employees. There's very often this what I call cultural issues that exist and there's this resistance and reluctance on the part of the foreign employer to at least come to, we would ask them to embrace our culture, but at least understand it, and when dealing with our local employers, treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And so Mr. Speaker, a number of our employees may find that what is happening to them may amount to an offense under such an act. And as I said, it is what modern-day slavery has been identified, not just in the Bahamas, but around the world, right, were the fundamental factors that assisted in informing the creation and the settling of this offense. And so, Mr. Speaker, and we'll perhaps discuss this when we come to debate the amendments to the Industrial Relations Act and the Employment Act that the member for Golden Gates just laid this morning, which serves to at least ameliorate some of the harshness of the law that employers sometimes embrace, and they say, well, I'm complying with the law, I'm complying with the law. We will probably discuss that then. So I just wish to acknowledge their presence whilst they're here, and also acknowledge again that the Minister of Labor is again fulfilling his long-standing promise to ensure that there's equity in the workplace on both sides. And I say equity on the side of the employer and the employee. And that has always been his goal and thrust as the Minister of Labor. And so it is that you would find, Mr. Speaker, that this, though it is long in coming, it was long because he took the opportunity and the time to ensure that all of the stakeholders were on board. And we understand that is the case in respect to this. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I had hoped last week that this amendment would have been done on the nod. But since they required us to debate it, I need not to suffer the House with any further comments on this bill, save to say that I concur with the remarks made and the contribution made by the member from Fox Hill. I think he laid out the case for the amendment, and it is a proper thing for us to do to continue to ensure that no loopholes exist in our law to permit offenders of our law to get away. And in that regard, Mr. Speaker, I second the amendment.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act. As many? Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I note that the member for Fox Hill has indicated that this is a very important piece of legislation intended to demonstrate the government's proaction in dealing with a very serious problem affecting not only our country, but the entire world, and that is the very dark business of human trafficking. Because as we know, Mr. Speaker, the government, and might I be more focused in attributing responsibility, but the Attorney General's office was responsible for trying a landmark case in this country, seeking to secure a conviction for the first time in this country's history with respect to a case involving human trafficking. As many of us would know, the Attorney General's office was successful in securing a guilty verdict, as the member for Fox Hill has indicated. However, much to the chagrin of members on the side opposite, the matter was overturned by the appeals court based on a technicality that was overlooked by the Attorney General's office. The matter was tried in the Supreme Court, when in actuality the court found that it ought to have been tried in the magistrate's court or the lower court. And hence, the Tier 1 rating that the Bahamas had received from the U.S. State Department, it was thought by the side opposite, was put in jeopardy, because after all of the celebration by the government heralding the success in making the first or achieving the first conviction in a human trafficking case, it ended up being tossed. So technically now we've not ever had a successful conviction of a human trafficking case. And it's a shame, because we know that that was not the only case. We know there are other cases, and we expect that the Attorney General's office ought to know what case a matter should be tried in. What court, excuse me, thank you, member for Montague, what court a case ought to be tried in. If the Attorney General's office doesn't have the capacity to know whether it should be in a lower court or a higher court, then I think it leaves many in our country concerned about our ability to govern ourselves, to observe the rule of law, because, quite frankly, the taxpayers pay for the time that the court spends hearing these matters, and that was time and taxpayer money wasted. Now, the member for Engliston, once again, has taken into account that this is a very important piece of legislation, as prefaced by the member for Fox Hill. The member for Engliston could take her time to come up these stairs with great difficulty because, as has been mentioned on numerous occasions, this is a very old building, does not conform with the legal statute passed by this House that requires that all buildings are handicap accessible. The member for Engliston could find her way up here on crutches, because this is important business.
Yes, sir.
Human trafficking is a serious thing. And yet, Mr. Speaker, I draw your attention to Section 86, subsection 5, that says, and I quote, "A member of the House shall vacate his seat in the House if he is absent from sittings of the House for a period of 90 days without leave of absence from the House." End quote. Now, Mr. Speaker, unless there is some verifiable excuse to show cause that a member absent from this House for 90 or more days, then I think, Mr. Speaker, the House ought to take that as it takes any law brought or any legislation brought to this House for its approval, because, see, this is the law that governs this place. And like the Attorney General's office, we expect them to know the law. But we expect this House to know its law. And it has been 92 days, Mr. Speaker, since December the 12th, Mr. Speaker, that the member purportedly representing Elizabeth was last present in this house.
Very well.
It's just totally irrelevant to this. I mean, he can use whatever devices he wishes to raise this matter, but this debate is about amending the Criminal Procedure Code. This is not nonsense.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Fort Charlotte, you've made the point.
Mr.
The
Speaker,
House.
I just asked this
Member
House.
for Fort Charlotte,
Mr.
I am speaking.
Yes. I'm listening, sir.
No, sit.
Oh,
Very well. That's the rules. The House.
no, just to be clear, the rule is when you stand, I sit. Just to be clear.
When I speak, you sit. Period. That's the rule. The House takes under advisement your comments. They're duly noted. They are duly noted. You've made your case regarding the honourable member. Now the House will continue its work and make its and do its duties according to the rules. The chair now asks you to move on and not make this into a further issue. You've made your case. You made your point. Member for Fox Hill.
The problem with that remaining on the record, however, is because this side has to, if the member is making an allegation about a specific set of days, first of all, as I understand the rules, days, I don't know what days actually means. What does that actually mean? What are the 92 days you're counting? So we are then bound now to go with that in the public domain to try and meet whatever case that is. So I'm saying the matter needs to be removed. It is irrelevant to this debate, has nothing to do with it. He uses an artifice which is artificial to bring a matter which is completely irrelevant to this debate and should be struck out.
Very well, honourable member. Member for Fort Charlotte, the chair, take your seat. The chair is not advised as to why you thought it fitting to bring this matter and air it today for this purpose. Any information regarding any honourable member, if there was a reason to consider that it was the appropriate thing to do regarding a member's action, it would be appropriate in this case to bring it to the speaker's, to the chair's attention in camera. But to come here today in the middle of a debate and speak to a particular member's absence based on a rule that has not been investigated or substantiated, I think it is inappropriate. I think it is inappropriate. And so, whereas the chair doesn't feel as strongly about it to strike it from the record as was suggested by the member for Fox Hill, the chair feels that you ought to leave the matter alone and move on. It is in the public domain. Any member could address it at any time during the debate. They have a right to, but this matter, I don't want to go down that road any further regarding that. Member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you, because it indeed does have relevance to what we are here discussing. As the member for Cat Island, Rum Kingston, Salvador, just before me, on his feet, indicated that there were concerns about Chinese workers at Baha Mar having their passports held by their employer. It was not specified whether that employer was the Chinese contractor or whether that employer was a permanent resident residing in Lyford Key. That was not specified. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, is that matter was not by you deemed irrelevant because it does pertain to what we're discussing. The member for Elizabeth is now the lawyer representing Chow Tai Fook in this country.
That is irrelevant.
That is
irrelevant.
true.
That is further irrelevant. That's worse. That's a relevant argument. And I order that be stricken from the records. That is, that will not, we will not go down. We're not going to do it. I'm not going there. Off the record, that's stricken from the record. Move on.
Mr. Speaker,
Change the subject.
Mr. Speaker, we in this country are supposed to be about trying to evolve or advance this country as we evolve. Not about trying to run away from the facts. We are talking about what this government says is serious business. There are many people out there that say this place should be dissolved. Take us to an election.
Point of order, member for Fox Hill.
Simple amendment was brought here to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act. This has nothing to do with who is the lawyer for what company. Irrelevant. Has nothing to do with which member's been missing allegedly for 92 days. Irrelevant. The rules are quite strong and strict. Relevance. You often remind us about it at the start of the proceedings. That you must be relevant, not irrelevant. If you want to go and fight elections, go outside and fight elections. But right now, the House is in session to deal with legislation for this country. That's what we're trying to do. Not to be thrown off track by nonsense and rubbish.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Trella, take your seat. You see, what you have attempted to do, Honourable Member, is blindside this House, and that's irresponsible. The chair always is reserved because if the fact speaks truth to power, then sometimes there's a place for it. But you cited a rule when you spoke of the member's absence, and you spoke of Rule 86, subsection 5, and it reads, a member of the House shall vacate his seat in the House if he is absent from sittings of the House for a period of 90 days. The word there is sittings, and so I'm not sure where you got your math from. But to come to this House and to accuse a member without having the substantive facts with you, to discuss it with a senior member of this House, or to discuss it with one of my clerks, or to the chair itself, is irresponsible. And I order that all of what you have said regarding that member is hereby stricken from this record. Now, if you mention that member's name again, you will be named and asked to leave these chambers. You're being irresponsible, personal, it's objectable, it is offensive, and don't try it again. Final ruling. Member for Fort Charlotte, you have the floor.
I think that the Bahamian people have been able to glean a lot from that.
Member, continue your contribution.
Continuing, absolutely.
Very well.
So, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that we have two sets of rules in our country. One for those who have power, and one for those who do not. Mr. Speaker, we on the opposition side, we are powerless. We are powerless to have a say in the governance of this country. We come to this House and we are supposed to be peers, equals. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, while those in opposition to us claim that we are weak, we cannot be strong if our voices are silenced. We have, Mr. Speaker, legislation that deals with people whose power, whose independence is snatched away from them. People who do not have the benefit of law enforcement to protect them. Many times these people are brought into this country on false pretenses, made to believe that they will engage in work, which, when they arrive, they find does not exist. We said that we were about a new generation, forging a new generation of political leaders. And I have found, Mr. Speaker, that absolutely does not exist. We in this country are playing politics the same way in 2017 that was played in 1967 and prior in the days of the UBP. In those days, they gave people flour. They gave people food in the can. Because, you know, us little old black people, that could hold us. That'll keep us pacified, massa. Oh, how terrible it is when we do not know the power that we possess. Woe be unto he who fails to understand his responsibility, not to a political party, but to this country, so that history will duly record that he was on the right side. Mr. Speaker, there are people in this country now, economic slaves, not any better off than those pre-1967. And more than mere talk of equity and justice, they want to see verifiable proof and action that we are about what we say or claim to be about. Not one case, as though there's only one example of human trafficking going on in this country. Not so that we can show the U.S. Embassy, look here, this is what we have. One case. Now hopefully you'll leave us alone. But what is the totality of your body of work? I can't say that I am progressive or that I am a new generation anything if my actions do not reinforce my words. This side. And no, I'm not campaigning because I'm not running. And I am so glad that I get the applause of the member for Fox Hill, because what he is about is perpetrating the status quo. And as far as the member for Fox Hill is concerned, this is big people's business. And young people like me ought to stay out of big people's business. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, anyone elected to this House is an equal.
No doubt about that.
And the people out there expect young and old to speak up and fight for they and their families.
Take my brother. Well, fine, just with you. You know you're good. You are the good wicket. Keep going. All that politics, right? Are you his friend? Always. Love him,
You know, Mr. Speaker, we talk about being trapped, the way persons who are trafficked are trapped, enslaved by those who make money off of their servitude. But Bahamians in New Providence must have been feeling trapped these last near 2 weeks in their homes with the smoke as oppressive as it has been. Excuse me? Are you afraid to hear the truth?
Member, take a seat.
On a point of order.
Point of order?
I find that, I was finding this quite entertaining and so on and so forth, but really, the bill, man, could we please speak to the bill? Did you study the bill? Do you understand what it's saying? It has implications. Look, you say I'm status quo. You said the member said I'm status quo. Okay? Now, no, I'm going to defend myself now. You made an allegation against me, which I take exception to. I just didn't want to interrupt you at the time. Because I could tell you what arguments to put. If you want to be anti-status quo on this bill, I could tell you. I could move from here right over there and put the opposition case. Well, you can be out. You can be out.
Members.
You can be out. So that's the point. All I'm saying is come back to the point, man. We finish with the entertainment for the morning, man.
Thank you, honorable member. Member for Fort Charlotte.
Say absolutely nothing, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely nothing.
The member did address the relevance issue, and it is an issue on the table.
Mr. Speaker?
We're talking about criminal procedures.
Yes, absolutely. And it is criminal, Mr. Speaker. It is absolutely criminal that we are breathing in intoxicants on a daily and nightly basis in this country. And that is absolutely relevant because Bahamians, particularly those who live in and around...
Members, very well.
Those, and you don't even have to live in and around the landfill, Mr. Speaker. As far east as Yamacraw and as far west as Lyford Key, we are inhaling intoxicants in a place they call paradise. Mr. Speaker, and I have heard the member for Tall Pines complain about it and challenge his government time and time again. You can't tell me that he's sat down and been silent. And that is why I've applauded him before. But the point that I'm making is, and it's not a problem that is owned singularly by the PLP, it is an F&M problem too. I acknowledge it. But what I am saying is, and I've heard the member for Fox Hill say it before, governments ought to be proactive. I even heard him this morning talking about research and development. I've heard the member for Fox Hill say today that he believes in research and development. Where, Mr. Speaker? Where is the research and development in relation to what we are going to do about a noxious landfill that is likely causing cancer, respiratory diseases, all right, causing... Mr. Speaker, it ought to be an indictable offense what is being perpetrated on the Bahamian people as a result of the neglect associated with that landfill. And, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about what is and is not important and what is and is not relevant, this is a debating chamber where we're supposed to come in here and raise the concerns that matter most to the Bahamian people. That's fine. That matter most to the Bahamian people. And if we don't have a bill coming in here on the landfill or a proposal to a new set of, a new piece of proposed legislation to deal with the landfill, ought I wait a year or 2 years before I can come into this place to discuss it? I mean, this is the Bahamian people elected us to speak to their concerns. And as it relates to the landfill, it is totally unacceptable for Bahamians to invest over $100,000 to build their empire on a piece of rock. They have 2-year-old, 3-year-old children who are developing asthma, potentially will be afflicted with leukemia or other cancers at a young age, simply because we want to bury our heads in the sand, the same way that people do about human trafficking, because it does not affect them. They don't know that there are people working in this country as helpers, maids, gardeners, who are forced to have sex with their employers. The same way we don't hear about it, does it mean that it doesn't exist? If I don't live in Jubilee Gardens or in Tall Pines, does it mean that I ought not to express a concern? You see, when you go to the fire, I agree with my colleague from Tall Pines. I don't expect to see you in a political hat to say, I reach. It isn't about politics, Mr. Speaker. Me being in here has never been about politics. That is why I have no regrets about anything that I've done in here. Because to try to say that I'm prepared to do anything to survive politically will make me a prostitute. And I'm not prepared to do anything to stay in this place. Unlike some inside here who will sit down and do whatever their side asks them to do so that they could stay on the gravy train. Well, let me take that back. So that they could continue to say, I am an MP, and get over it. You have nothing to live for in life if that's all that you care about. Who am I talking about? Anybody who forgets their moral compass. Simply because if they don't do something, their party will be upset with them. We gotta get out of that, man. This country deserves better. I mean, the people in Turks and Caicos are doing better than we're doing. Huh? And we want to bring people up here to say we have in state dinner so the president of Guyana can come here and have them, living in the lap of luxury. You know how people, wallowing in I mean, what we are doing in this country is not working. It's not working. We have as a reality, we have our country being set up to be dictated to by foreign powers. I understand realpolitik. I understand that we are, in many cases, under the very watchful eye of the United States, and we are beholden to them because without the United States, economically, we are nothing. It's not true. Find me 90% of your tourism income from another source, and then you'll be correct. Until then, we are at the mercy of the United States of America. And it's difficult to hear a Bahamian politician say that, but I believe in being real. However, and they quote Sir Lyndon Pilling all the time, and despite his warts, despite his frailties and his weaknesses, I accord respect to the man because he had a lot of wisdom. He had weaknesses, he did, but I accord him the respect of being our very first prime minister who understood that certain things were necessary to properly develop this country. Unfortunately, he went astray. Sir Lyndon Pilling went astray. Okay? What I am saying is this. Sir Lyndon Pilling knew that it would have been counter to the best interests of this country to allow state control of your economy by a foreign power. Do you think the Chinese would ever control Baha if Sir Lyndon Pilling, in his economic philosophy, were allowed to make a determination? In these circumstances, you think so? Mr. Speaker, negotiation tactics are such. You never allow the release of potentially damaging or damning contractual details to emerge before a general election. You never do. Because these people who are in here right now, the unionists, will be out in the streets with all of their membership saying this must not stand. This election, and I'm going to tell you this, and again, I'm going to keep it real because I had a very good conversation earlier with Madam President of the Hotel Union. No, I won't. Just hold your tongue. Hold your tongue. Hold your tongue.
You got the floor, man. Don't worry about that.
I had a very good conversation, but I will tell you this. I will tell you this. If you want to be prime minister and you want to be the most powerful person in this country, like the right honorable member for Centerville, I expect that the person who is aiming for your job is present and accounted for every day
And they don't
that we are inside this house.
Don't come.
And I look down there and I see absence.
Empty seat.
And if I were you, I would call him out on it.
Got to be absent, you're running. Gone, no opposition, they're gone. They're gone.
Go ahead, speak, man.
Leadership means that you stand up to your feet even if you feel that you are weak. You stand.
And someone will help you stand.
And then Long Island and Montague and Central Grand Bahama and Bamboo Town, we will help you stand. And I, you know, I'm upset. I'm spitting all over the place. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And you tell me you think this is how we're going to get this country moving? All of the difficulties you have to deal with when you have to take a phone call 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because things are not going right in this country. You have to be present and accounted for. Remember for Centerville? Don't think I'm playing politics, you know.
You just said that ain't right.
You see, but see, allow me to. The Bahamas situation, please, I ask this honorable house, lay the documents on the table.
Amen.
We need to know what you've promised the Chinese government.
And what you give.
Not that we have a personal problem with the Chinese. The Chinese control these enterprises. They are called SOEs, state-owned enterprises. They are owned by the Chinese. But we need to know what you promised the Chinese. Because as I was the first to say in this house, if it is found that what you promised and committed us to is not in our interest, we have a right to review. Now, I can't sell what I don't own.
Exactly.
Cat Island Rum Cay in San Salvador,
Exactly.
I can't. However, I am the one who establishes the legal framework and the parameters in which they must operate. Mr. Speaker, you see, in this next election, do not believe for 1 minute. And people have maligned the member for Long Island. Let me tell you this, and I want to say it on the record. We did not hold a gun to her head and tell her, down with Minnis. Oh, yeah. We didn't do that. No, you cut off your leg. We didn't do that. We believe that this opposition ought to have been performing much better. Thousands of Bahamians out there felt that we were falling down on the job. But if you fall down on the job, at least be on the job.
Be on the job.
You realize that minutes of life.
This the chorus stuff.
When you say you want something, show that you want it and show that you can handle it. And those who have a problem with me saying it, maybe you will at least acknowledge once and for all, it's high time we get from the primitive medieval times that we've been operating in and have the member for Centerville, the member for Kalani, and the member for the former member for Bamboo Town, the leader of the DNA, receive questions from the media. Let us know your mental capacity, your ability to think on your feet, your ability to comprehend the challenges facing this country. That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Mr. Speaker, no.
Just say you don't get in people's business?
Mr. Speaker, you can't tell me that this is the member for Long Island called it a playpen the other day. The country is not a playpen. The country is not a playpen. The same way the people who are under bondage because they're being held against their wishes as economic slaves, the same way that is not a game for them, this place is not a game for the Bahamian people. That's true. Tall Pines and the people of the entire New Providence, island of New Providence, they need rescue from this pernicious dump that is killing people.
Killing.
We may not see it now, but 10, 15 years from now, we will hear about it.
I've been through for 30 years.
You ain't dead yet?
We need the details of Bahama, and Mr. Speaker, we hope that those details are not damning, such that our country will be in bondage to the Chinese for years and generations to come.
Yeah,
Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank because I don't know how many more opportunities I'll have to come in this place.
Right.
But I wish to thank the people of Fort Charlotte for reposing their confidence in me and for allowing me to be what I said I would be, and that is their voice in this place. And second of all, I would be ungrateful if I did not say thank you to the Progressive Liberal Party, its stalwart councillors, particularly of Fort Charlotte, its foot soldiers, and yes, I want to thank the Right Honorable Member for Centerville for giving me this opportunity. But I hope you do understand that for all I have done to hold you accountable, it has been to promote a better country so that we, those of my generation, would be in a position to see a better future than our present. So, as I am a member of the FNM and I remain a member of the FNM, I am not too big to acknowledge where I ought to be thankful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? For the wrap-up,
Yes, please.
the Chair recognizes Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Oh, well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure whether or not the other side has any objections to the bill, because there were no issues which arose, so I assume that that the bill they find acceptable, and that they do not believe that anybody's rights are being prejudiced in any way by any of the provisions of the bill. I did want to say on some of the things that he said, just for historical record, I think that it was the general election of 2007 or 2012, I'm not sure, when there was a debate which was scheduled for the then College of the Bahamas. And all of, if my recollection is correct, all of the members of Parliament, all of the sides represented then in that election showed up to the debate, with the exception of the Free National Movement. So I'm not sure whether referring to the old to the crude old days and so on and so forth, whether that is in fact a correct reference, because I know there was a debate which was scheduled in one of the campaigns, and I'll show you whether it's 2002 or 07, at the University of the Bahamas, then at the College of the Bahamas. All right, so Mr. Turnquest showed up. But there was a debate which took place, and the Progressive Liberal Party's leader took part in that debate. I think the member was making the point that this is something that needs to be done, and suggesting that it had not been done in the past. So I was saying my recollection is it was done in the past. As for the Attorney General's office and the competence of its attorneys and whether the Attorney General's office got it right, You know, law is a living thing. And sometimes you find out what you thought that you had passed and what you'd believed and what you'd been by practice. Sometimes another lawyer is able to find that it is not, or is able to convince a court that it's not what you thought it was. And this happens all the time. I just think of one prominent American case where there was a prosecution for a corruption offense. And this prosecutor was convinced that in situations where someone called up on the phone and asked you as a politician to make an appointment for someone, and I think the governor of this state got a gift of some kind, that this was a corruption offense. But when it went up to the Supreme Court said no. So that was a first for everybody. So you find these things out. And law is a living case. If you find you've made an error, you seek to correct the error. What I think is important is when one is correcting an error, and it's not for me to put the opposition's case, but when one is correcting an error, you want to be sure that the rights of the Bahamian people, the potential defendants, are not going to be adversely affected in any way. That's the important point. Is what the government proposing, will it adversely affect the rights of Bahamians? That issue wasn't addressed at all. We believe it doesn't. We don't believe there's any vested right which is disturbed. But that issue was not addressed in the debate. But I would think that that would be an important point to put. Now, as for who represents what generation and the next generation and so on and so forth, I think everybody has to be concerned about what is called ageism. And I believe that the basic qualification to run for this place is that you need to be 21 years of age. My recollection is that the youngest member of parliament that's been elected to this place may have been Stafford Sands or Sir Roland Simonette. They were in their early 20s. And they survived for quite a long time. Mr. Franklin Wilson came along in 1972. He may have been about 26 or 27 at the time. He was elected to office. Sir Lyndon Pindling was 26 when he was elected in 1956. When the member for Fort Charlotte was chosen as a candidate for the Progressive Liberal Party, he was indeed seen as one of a new generation of politicians. And I thought that his coming into the Progressive Liberal Party would be a benefit to the organization. Because you need to have, in any organization, a range of ideologies, a range of ages, a range of races, a range of thoughts. And the one thing that particularly impressed me is because I knew him when he was a youngster at St. John's College. And the West Indies Commission was visiting the Bahamas to talk about what the future of the Bahamas would be. And we were casting around. I was then head of a party called PDF. We were casting around to find someone who would be able to speak into the future. And this was no doubt a bright young man. In fact, if you look at his history and his resume, you will see, and I told my colleagues this, you will see that this is a man who's been the head of almost every organization that he's joined. So that tells you, if you're bringing him into your organization, what you're looking at. This is a man who's not going to be content to stay on the back benches. He obviously had ambitions for the top. Now, here's the thing I keep trying to figure out, right? all my life, the Deputy Prime Minister's life, the two of us have a similar track. No, not the same, essentially the same cohort. And, you know, you can make light of this if you want. But people to get in this House of Assembly is a rare favor, a very rare favor. It's very difficult to get here. And people who get here, the number, and difficult to state, the number of kids. Yeah, but you look at, I'm saying the number of kids, you look at the number of kids who want to run, who want to be members of Parliament. And I think it is precisely because they see a young man like the member for Fort Charlotte who gets up and he could say anything he feels like, anytime, just say whatever he wants. And I'm sorry, I know that the member wants to trivialize this. I'm not seeking to be trivial. Please, I'm not seeking to be trivial. He wasn't trivial when he was talking, making his remarks at me, and I wish you'd just take it in that light for once. You know? I'm not seeking to be trivial. And that's right, I may be, but I am. And I'm not seeking to be trivial. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is this is a young man who got the rare favor of becoming a member of this place, something that hundreds of youngsters want to have. And so once you get here, being a politician, the art of politics, as I understood it, is survivability. You want to stay here because things are very difficult to solve. Problems are very difficult to solve, and you can't solve them in 5 years. You know, to keep 38 people together is very difficult, or to keep 21 people together in a majority is very difficult. And everybody has their own ambitions. So what I say is that I almost wished, you know, looking back, that it were possible for someone, like in a Charles Dickens novel, to come and say, you're it. But that's essentially what happened to the Member of Parliament for Fort Charlotte. The Member of Parliament for Centerville was sitting at a public debate where he was at. He was part of an organization called the NDP at the time, did a wonderful performance at this debate, and the PLPs in the room said, we want that one. And they went out and they got him. And obviously, he obviously thought there was mutual benefit to him. Now, what I can't understand, ambitious as you are, you want to get to the top. You have an organization where by effluxion of time, you don't have to do anything. Anything. They give you a seat. There's a machinery in place for you. All you have to do is walk through the neighborhood, say hi. You get elected to office. I wish I had life that easy. You know, the member of Parliament for the former Prime Minister, when he was sitting here, used to make fun of me, said, I can't use the word beginning with A, but he said I was a gray-haired old so-and-so by the time I got here. And that's because I had to fight to get here. But someone chooses you and says, seat is yours, puts a machinery in place, gets you here. And then when you get here, he says, I'm going to give you chairman of the gaming board, another job. What do? You have technicians working for you. You fly all over the place, look at casinos, say that one looks good, that one looks good. You come back. And I'm saying, sir, that by effluxion of time, the Progressive Liberal Party would have graduated him to a position of prominence.
20 years from now, he'll be younger than he is today.
So that's the quizzical bit. So what I say, Mr. Speaker, about all of this, in summary, is there's no need to complain. There's no need to complain. You want to say that you make up the bed, so you lie in the bed. And that's how it works. And you know, you say you're going out and you're not running, fine. Good luck to you. Nice knowing you. You know, all the nice things you said and so on and so forth. But the fact is,
That's right. That's right. The Parliament, the Parliament is going to move on. The sun is going to rise tomorrow. The Progressive Liberal Party is going to have a strong fight in this next general election. We can put a candidate in Long Island, in every seat, and we're going to make a strong push as to why there ought to be continuity of governance in this country, because we've done the heavy lifting during the last 5 years. We gave many people an opportunity and a chance to succeed. The member for Fort Charlotte being one of them, so he can't complain. And I'm happy that on this occasion he's able to say thank you to us for giving him the opportunity to get up and say all those things that he said, good and bad. And so by demonstration, he has shown that the Progressive Liberal Party is still the greatest political organization in this country. There is none other that can compete with the Progressive Liberal Party. None other. Warts and all. And we pledge, sir, as we face this country in the next general election, to provide a promise of good governance, to make this country stronger. We took this country into independence, and we mean to keep it the best little nation on this earth. We mean to keep it. And those who want to be fifth columnists and detractors and all of the rest of it, let the devil take the hindmost. Let the devil take the hindmost. Sir, I commend this bill to the House and to all my colleagues. It's been a great honor serving with you, and I look forward, if the Bahamian people should do so, to allow us to come back here. Come back here.
Thank you. Oh,
And I thank you, sir, for your indulgence.
thank you. The chair will just pass the bill. Thank you, honourable member, and thank all honourable members for your contribution. The question is, the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act. As many as are in favour will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act.
The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Cat Island, Rum Keen, San Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be suspended until 3 p.m.
Moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favour will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
Thank you.